I'm Evelyn Dutrasac, and I'm so honored today to be with Pierre Riopel. Thank you so much for accepting to do the memory mapping with us.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you.
The first thing I'd like to ask you a bit about yourself. What's your credo, your passion, your values? What has led Pierre Riopel? Those values.
Strangely enough, it was probably towards the end of my career that I actually found a quote that really meant something to me. And said, basically, that's what I've been trying to do throughout my career. And the quote was from Nelson Mandela. And I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And when I read that, I said, there you go. That's it. That's what I've been trying to do. And it took 20 or 22 years or whatever to sort of be able to put my finger on it and say, that's what it is. Because education, in my mind, is changing the world. One student, one kid at a time, making the world a better place, right? Mandela talks about a weapon. I think we can
I was going to ask you about that. It touches me. A weapon. What a weapon?
It's strange, I think, in a sense, because we instinctively sort of think of a weapon as a gun or whatever, but it is a force, maybe, if we want to look at it that way. And that's how I interpreted it, because it can be very sort of warlike as when we use the word weapon. But what is one of those tools? And education is a tool that you can use to change the world.
It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. And you're going to change the world, as I say, one kid, one student at a time in your daily interactions with these students. So if you ask me what my credo is or what my passion is, what a basic principle for me is, that's basically it, is that we can change our community for the better, because a change for a change is what it's worth. But a change in a positive sense of making my community a better place to live, a better place to, as I say, to live, to raise a family, to retire, whatever. Education is basic. Education is fundamental.
What I like what you're saying, it's one by one.
Yeah.
One person by one person.
Absolutely, because I mean the job is tremendous, right? However, as a teacher, you're in your classroom, and what's your zone of influence? It's the 22 kids you've got in front of you, or 26, or 18,
or 35,
or whatever, or 35. They've all experienced that. But in retrospect, and in the last 10 years of my career, that's where I really focused on this, because I think that's what it's all about.
Why did you choose to become an educator? And what path led you to become an educator?
Well, that's a tricky question for me, and I'm going to respond by sharing a story with you. My father was a high school teacher. He was a high school principal as well. I had a lot of family members that are, educators and so on and so forth. And I remember thinking distinctly as I was doing my undergrad, I want to do something else. So honestly, I can say this now in retrospect, after 40 years or so, I really resisted. I wanted to do something else. I had thought about law at one point. I had thought about journalism. I really did not want that path for myself.
Why? Why not?
Because I didn't want people to say, "Oh, well, his dad sort of opened doors for him," and so on and so forth. I wanted to be my own person. I think that's basically what it is. And no disrespect to my father, but I wanted to do things sort of on my own, to show my autonomy, to show that I was able to do it. And I think that's why at one point I had contemplated going into some other field of professional activity. Now, here's a story. the story is that it was about mid-September, and I got a phone call from a local high school principal, and I'll spare you all of the details, saying, I need a teacher. I have a schedule for you, and I'll be expecting you on Monday morning. So the whole weekend, I sort of seriously debated, am I going to do this? Do I want to do this? I don't want to do this. I'm just going to phone him and say, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to be there on Monday morning. And was convinced by some family members that maybe I should try it out. And if I really did not like it at that point, at least I could have said, honestly, I tried it and I didn't like it. So I showed up on Monday morning, and my teacher training, because I had none at that point, basically lasted all of 5 or 6 seconds. And the 5 or 6 seconds was, here's your schedule, here's your class list, and here are your resources. Have a good day.
So how did you react with that?
Well, you turn to colleagues and you say, okay, can you help me out here? I know how a high school run. Well, it's sort of run in the sense that I had not graduated that long before from high school. So I understood, the whole concept of a schedule and so on and so forth. But it was the teaching part. When you're in the classroom, what do you do? When you have, because you have the experience of your former teachers, but now you're the one running the show. You're the one running the classroom. So I was surrounded by very, very generous and very kind teachers, colleagues, who said, let me help you out. Okay?
What were those qualities that, like you had very little experience, and listening to you, what are the qualities that make you become a great teacher, or that you are a great teacher? Because you're going in there with no experience at all, and you're going in, you didn't want to go in, but you went try. Did you reflect on that time as a young man?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, probably the strongest time of reflection was between 8:30 in the morning that first day and 3 o'clock that afternoon. Because basically what I was saying to myself is, do I like this? Is this all right? Does this correspond with what I want to do in life? And at the end of the day, I asked to see the principal, and he found a few minutes in his schedule to meet me. And I said, I will be back tomorrow morning. And he grinned and said, very good, I'll expect you. And probably at that point, that's where I came to the conclusion that, you know what, I really like being around kids. I like this, and I see the leadership qualities that I can use within a classroom context or within a school. I felt even in that first day, and I was very honest with the students. I said, this is my first job, never done this before, and they were very, very kind. We got along wonderfully well together. Anyway, in my mind, I still meet some of those kids in the community today, and it's a lot of fun to see them. And I said, we knew, monsieur, we knew you were just a young puppy, but, it went well. And I think there was mutual respect as well in the classroom, as much my respecting the students as the students respecting me. I said, you know what, I'm going to do the best that I can with what I got.
You were honest. You were very honest with them.
Quite simply.
And they understood that.
Yeah. And as I say, I'm thinking of one of those students in particular who, writes me maybe once a year or so. So, hi, monsieur. And they still call me monsieur. I think that's hilarious. But, hi, monsieur, how are you doing? What's new? Or the same student will say, did you see this in the news? And just the fact that I have students reading the news, because I taught history, social sciences, and that type of thing. We used to do a lot of work on reading newspapers and so on, and sort of summing things up in a couple of paragraphs, analyzing and allowing them with those exercises of becoming citizens and making their mind up on what they agreed with and what they disagreed with, and expressing their opinions.
They had a voice. You taught them how to have a voice.
Absolutely. And I made them read all kinds of stuff. Once again, I'm thinking of a story. Parents had come in one day and wanted to meet me. And we always think the worst, right? When that happens. And the parent, the father, shook my hand and congratulated me and thank me, because he per week was spending something like, at that time, and this was like 35 years ago, something like $8 or $10 a week to buy newspapers for his daughter, because his daughter wanted to read up on all kinds of things. So the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star and the Sudbury Star and so on and so forth. But this young student was reading, first of all, and was reading news and was making her mind up on local issues, provincial issues, national issues, whatever. So I shook his hand and I said, you know what? I could give you the $10 a week if you'd like. He says it's the best investment. It's all good. So anyway, I thought that was kind of nice.
So you were positive, like I'm today, and I'm gone away a bit from the questions.
Yeah.
If you met a teacher today that's teaching today, and I know we've had COVID, and that has been tough. What would you say to a teacher today, from your experience?
Develop those human relationships. Work on that, because that's what your job entails. There's a lot of knowledge that's going to be shared, and there's a lot of you'll be working on competencies, for instance, in the classroom and so on and so forth. And that's all the sort of pedagogical aspect. But there's also the human aspect of who are these kids, and letting them know who you are, right? And you've got good days and you've got bad days like everyone else, without being a non-professional. But I think that you want to build on that, basically.
And education is so important today. It was important then too. Yeah. It's important today. Yeah. I think that the sharing that with educators, teachers is important, because sometimes, did you feel alone sometimes in the classroom? I think we often feel alone.
As a teacher?
As a teacher?
Oh, of course. Because you think that you're the only one experiencing the challenge, or is experiencing that positive experience. Think of all of your colleagues in the school, and don't. I mean, you might not get along with everybody, but there are certain people with whom you will get along. Share those experiences, and if you're having a rough time, reach out, because sometimes we're too proud, or we're too shy, or we're too embarrassed to say, I'm having a bit of a day here, and seeking advice and seeking help, because somebody has probably experienced what you're experiencing as a teacher, and it's a choice. Is the door going to be closed, or are you going to open the door and go seek advice and go seek that help?
It's like camaraderie. It's a friend.
Friendship. And sometimes it can just be listening, right? Like, without giving a solution. I don't know what solution to give you, but I'll listen, kind of thing. But anyway, I think that and for having experienced it as well, I can remember in my first years teaching, we had a group of, oh my heavens, we still visit. We're still friends. We still see one another regularly, and these people are all over Ontario and even in Montreal. Thank God these people were there when I taught in this specific school. That we could talk, we could discuss, we could okay, come on over, have dinner, and I have to talk about this, right? So yeah,
I gave you support.
Of course.
Now,
and
you gave.
I would support as well.
Well, that's it.
And my other colleagues would support. So it was sort of our support group. Let's put it that way.
Your path in education as a teacher, but share with us other paths that you've taken throughout your lifetime in terms of education.
You mean professionally?
Professionally.
Yeah. Well, I taught for a few years, and then came back home, because I was in Toronto for approximately 6 years, if memory serves me well. Came back to Sudbury, to the School of Education, the French Language School of Education, l'École des Sciences de l'Éducation, and taught there for 5 years. And I had thought that in the long term, I wanted to teach at the School of Ed. Had started a doctorate. I already had my master's from U of T. I had my undergrad. I had my teaching certification. In the meantime, I sort of went on and did principal's qualification course. started my supervisory officer's qualification as well. And I started my doctorate and I completed all of my required course load. And at one point I said, I'm not sure I want to get involved in a doctorate. I mean, we all know how long that can take. It can take 5, 6, 7 years or whatever. I wasn't there. And what I wanted to do was go back to a school, be with kids. So that's why I became a high school principal for a couple of years, and then eventually made it to the board as a supervisory officer and director of education, and eventually retired as president of Collège Montréal. So it was all of these opportunities, these doors that opened up. If you had asked me, as I said, it was a bit of an accident that I got the call on Friday afternoon to come and teach for us. It wasn't in the plans that all of this would happen. That every time a door opened up, I kind of said, well, do you want it to close or do you want to open it up? And what are you going to do in the job that if it is offered to you, what will you want to contribute? What will you want to be doing in that job?
Is it important at times in your life to change from one position to another when you're in education, for example? Because you went from teaching high school, going to principal, going to a school of education, and then going to Boreal. Is it important that...
I would say so. I'm reminded of one of our mentors when I was taking my principal's course had said to me, you're in education now, expect to be in a job, in a position for 5 to 7 years. Okay? Might be 4, it might be 6, which is approximately 5 to 7 years. Because at one point or another, you get to that stage where you're going to go, do I have anything else to give here? What else do I have to give? And that's where maybe you start saying, okay, well, maybe it's time to move on to something else. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I can still remember, and these are all kinds of thoughts that just come to mind. When I had started teaching, in my mind, basically, I just want to be in a school. I want to do my 30 years as a teacher in a school, end of story. Because that's very, very secure. And once you realize that, you know what? Yeah, you can move on to something else. Because at one point you develop skills in one job, and that can be helpful in the next job. And it just so happens that we're in a hierarchy and that's the way it's done. But what is the effect of my passage in that job? How can I affect, for instance, or have a positive effect? Because I think positive effect is important on a school, on a system, on an organization. And once I get to the point, or even sometimes the organization will let you know, yeah, okay, I think we've done what we needed to do, then maybe it's time to move on to something else.
You've had a wonderful career.
Yeah.
If you had to share with us the rewards, the passions that you've benefited, and even the struggles or even the challenges that you've had throughout your career. You're involved, as you just mentioned. What are the passions, the strengths, the rewards? And also, are there any struggles or challenges that you've had as an individual being in the educational field?
I think the rewards or the things that my positive takeaways, let's do it that way. It's the relationships with your former colleagues. And I'm thinking of some of them that I've been in contact with just in the past couple of days. We worked, so closely together for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then you're not in that work environment anymore. And you've either moved on or you've retired, but you've still kept those memories. And most of these people, I would say, it's like I had seen them just a couple of days before, when we messenger or we give a call or so on and so forth. So as much, for my colleagues, and I call them kids, your students, it's all of these relationships and it's the network that creates that's absolutely incredible and very, very powerful. And it's all of the memories. In the spring, I sat down with 3 of my former students and we just talked about, so I was the one asking the questions. So how was high school for you guys? And off they went. And we had a hoot because they gave their perspective. And now, believe it or not, their kids are in high school. So they're saying, well, anyway, my kid's high school isn't quite working as well as the high school that I went to. And then we talked about that.
And how did it make you feel? How did you feel?
Very, very, very proud. I mean, they let me know, I really didn't like this, sir. Okay, that's fine. That's all right. But you understand why. I understand why, or, I really enjoyed this, and thank God that we were in that high school, and thank God that you and your colleagues were there, and so on and so forth. So generally speaking, it was quite positive on their part, but it was interesting to hear of these adults, right? I mean, these kids, when I knew them at age 16, fast forward 25 or 30 years, they're adults now, and they're coming in with their perspective. So I think that's very rich. Now, some of the challenges, there are two that come to mind. And once again, if I go into my experience as a teacher, the first thing is the demands, what we expect, what we require of the school system. The school system, the classroom is almost like it's supposed to be everything for everyone. So you've got the ministry's requirements, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do this. And then you've got the board's requirements, and then you've got the school's requirements. And I'm saying this very humbly as a former high school principal, a former school board administrator, and college administrator. That at one point, that was a challenge. It was a challenge for me. Other people will say it's not as much as a challenge, and that's fine. But I found that sometimes to be a bit of a challenge in trying to prioritize, because we're dealing with human beings every day, and you can plan as much as you want, and you can have the best lesson plan, everything is, and then something human happens. And you're kind of going, okay, well, I'm going to have to react to that. That becomes my priority in the next couple of hours. So that to me was challenging. And when I look at teachers today, and I was in classroom just a week ago, and I look at them and I go, good for you that you're able to prioritize, you're able to juggle all of those responsibilities. The other thing that I always found was a bit of a challenge, especially as a classroom teacher, and that's why as principal and even as superintendent, was to try and say, okay, how can we minimize our administrative footprint, i.e., all of the forms that you have to fill, the reports, the this, the that, and so on and so forth. And I get it, I understand. Maybe I want to use the expression a necessary evil, because we need those. I get it, because we have to, there's checks and balances and so on and so forth. You have to make sure that things are done well. But on the other hand, it's an additional requirement, right? So I remember as a principal, filling out some forms sometimes for teachers, staying late one night or arriving early in the morning and saying, I filled out the form, you just have to sign it, read and sign. And, some of these teachers would say, thank you for doing that. That's fine, because that means she gets 15 minutes more in her day to spend time with her students. So anyway, in terms of challenges, those are the two things that come to mind.
Good. Okay, since your retirement, have you been involved in the community? And how has your life experience, if you have, and I know you are, well, how's your life experience helped you in your retirement years now?
Very good question, and I appreciate the question, because I've been retired now for 8 years, and probably the best lesson that I learned in my first few months of retirement is you don't stop knowing. You don't stop knowing how to do, right? So if I were to give advice, I would say retire. Let's say you're retiring at the end of August or end of June. Take a couple of months off. Take up maybe up,
Why
up
would
to
you
Christmas.
take a couple of months off?
Because I've seen too many people retire, and within 2 weeks they start a new job, and they're still there, right? They're in that sort of rhythm, but at one point or another, just to take time off for yourself. And what I did is that I threw out a lot of paper, because as a teacher or retired teacher, you've got a lot of paper. Get things sort of in order. And that's where I came to the realization that I have not stopped knowing, and I've not stopped knowing how to do things. So the skills that I have, and the skills that you accumulate as a teacher or in the school system for over 30 years, has to be beneficial for somebody. And then choose your cause. What do you want to do? And apply those skills, apply that knowledge. Because you can't unknow, right? You know how to do things. Of course, but it might be in something else completely. If you decided to go back and to supply teach, that's fine too. In my case, I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I wanted to do something else. So I'm a member of a lot of committees, advisory committees, and so on and so
Give
forth.
us some examples of those advisory committees and those committees that have permitted you to use your talents, your experience.
One of the committees that I enjoyed the most was what is called a judicial advisory committee, and I was there for 4 years. That's the maximum that you can serve. I might have changed, but and the job of the committee is to recommend to the Minister of Justice, and this is at the federal level, recommend to the Minister of Justice appointments to the bench. And so this was in the legal world. I had taught law in high school, but it's not quite the same thing. This is a whole other world with its own vocabulary, its own acronyms, its own, language. It's a whole new culture. But I realized that with all of the HR experience that I have from the school board, we received applications. So we had to read applications and sort of from a list, sort of say, okay, well, what are the skills that we're seeking? What about this candidate? What about that candidate? And then have this discussion as a committee, and then move the file forward or not. But that's where I realized I know things, right? And this can be applied here, even if it's not the world of education. It's another world, but
you can share that knowledge
absolutely, absolutely, and it can be beneficial. It can be beneficial. I think that's the main thing.
And what other groups have you participated in?
I was a board member for EQAO, for instance. I was on the Ministers' Advisory Committee for Francophone Affairs provincially. So it was locally, provincially, and federally. And locally, mostly involved with the University of Sudbury, for instance.
Oh.
I've been a board member there now for 12 years. I've been chair since 2017. So I mean, that with everything that has happened in the university world and in this area in Sudbury over the past couple of years, it has been a challenge. But
why did you get involved there with Laurentian University? What's your passion about Laurentian University?
It's the University of Sudbury more specifically, which was a federated university. My father graduated from the University of Sudbury in 1960. And he was a board member there for quite a few years. And I was approached, as I say, about 12 years ago or so. Would you like to be a board member? I understood, for having been in the school board and at the college, I understood what the role of a board was. I was interested in the university sector, because, I mean, you graduate from university, but you really don't know who the board members are, or you really even don't know who the president is. But I wanted to explore that world, which was a bit foreign to me, and understand it probably a little bit better. Knowing the role of a board, you're not in the daily running of the university, but I think you can have a positive influence on the organization itself. I'm wrapping up in a couple of weeks. I will have been board chair for 7 years. I will become past chair, which is all right. I'll continue to sit on the board for another couple of years, and I'll reevaluate at that point. But I think it was one of the reasons I wanted to get involved was interest in what the university sector is all about. For me, what's also important is la francophonie, because at that point the university was bilingual. Now it is a French language university, which is quite interesting in terms of the evolution of the University of Sudbury. And I look at all of the work that has been done over the years, and I'm very, very proud of where the University of Sudbury is right now.
It's touched a lot of people in this community.
Yeah.
University of Sudbury
Glad.
has an excellent reputation.
Yeah, very good.
And it's touched a lot of our people. What advice would you give to the younger generation after your paths of life? An important advice. One advice or more than one?
I've got three things that I would say. First of all, seek advice. Don't be afraid to do so. Seeking advice is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's because you want to take the right decision for you, but consult. Consult a former teacher, consult a colleague, consult a family member, consult a business person in your community. It doesn't matter. Just consult somebody you trust and say, this is the question I'm asking myself right now. Can you help me out? What are you thinking? And you will be amazed at the words of wisdom that you will get. I remember seeking advice as a 23, 24-year-old, and I still visit a former colleague of my father's who had said, trust yourself. And I still remember these words 35 years
They had an impact, a big impact on your life.
Trust yourself. And it takes a bit of time to sort of assimilate that. But once you understand it, you're going to go, okay, I get what you mean. But my first advice would be to seek advice. My second advice would be to read. Take time, take half an hour a day, whatever, read. Don't do like I did in the sense of right now I'm sort of trying to catch up and read all of the things I should have read. In my life, I've read a lot, and I read a lot in high school and university, but now I'm reading the things that I want to read. And it's different. I mean, when you're a teacher, you're reading memos, you're reading, student assignments and so on and so forth. Read something for you. And even if it takes you 6 months to read whatever, read something for you, right? And
so it's not the quantity of time, it's something you like reading.
Give yourself a break, right? And it can be a self-help book. It can be a classic. Right now, I'm reading classics because there are a lot of classics that I have not read. And when you're chatting with people and say, oh, have you read so-and-so? Oh, yeah, but you really haven't read it. I think we've all done that. But anyway, that would be my piece, certainly my piece of advice there. And the last thing that I would suggest is to take time for yourself. And the activity is not important. Whatever you do that's not the important part. Is take time for yourself. If it's that half hour because you want to go swimming, you want to go for a walk, you just want to sit there and vegetate and look at the fire, and vary those activities, but take time for yourself. It's like a little bit like taking a daily holiday. That's all right, because when we take a holiday, we want to resource ourselves. Do it.
One final question, 2 parts. Looking on your life, all your path in life, is there something that you would do differently? One thing that you might consider doing differently, and then another one that you cherish the most. What you've cherished the most in your path, your life as an educator.
The one thing that I would do differently is that I would take care of myself more. I know this is going to sound a bit odd because we've all had this advice. It's important to have breakfast. It's important to eat lunch, and it's important to have dinner. For years, I would have coffee in the morning and then run on the caffeine and then have supper at 5:30. So taking the time for lunch, right? having that sandwich or having an apple or having whatever, just taking that time and looking after yourself. In retrospect, I sort of look back and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, that was not a wise decision. You know, we say to kids, make the right choice. As an adult, I can sort of say I didn't make the right choice. If I were to give a piece of advice on that one, or if I were to look back on my life and something that I wanted to redo or adjust, that would certainly be the thing.
And what do you cherish the most?
What I cherished the most was the time spent with students and colleagues and those relationships. And I, you know, with your questions, I go back into experiences, and I'm thinking of traveling to Europe with a couple of groups of students, and that quality time with these students, sitting on a plane, you know, how many thousand feet over the Atlantic, and having a conversation and just being human, in your classroom, in the hallway, chatting with these kids. You're in a living and a learning environment. And once again, if I look back, now having been retired approximately 10 years, and getting news from former students and having dinner, having lunch with former students and chatting, saying, so, you know, how's life? How is life treating you? Well, sir, I did this and I shouldn't have done that, but I did this and I think this was a good decision, and so on and so forth. Because some of these, I'm going to call them kids, they're my kids, even if they're 50 years old or 45 years old or whatever. I'm thinking of a conversation I had with one of them in October, just 6 weeks ago. And it was a very, very honest conversation that now he is making decisions for his children. Okay. And he said, you know, at one point he said, this is the decision we made because I remember you're saying this and that. So you don't know the impact of your words in the classroom. You don't know the impact of the messages that you're sending. And I'm thinking of the example of a GIC, right? A GIC, you invest $1,000 in 6 months, you go back and you've got a bit of interest and so on and so forth. But education is more like a mutual fund. And sometimes you have no idea where it's going to bring you. And you get your return and you kind of go, okay, well, that was good. A lot of kids, when they graduated at the end of June, you never see them again. Unfortunately, mm-hmm. I mean, that's what life is all about. But for those that you do see again, and that they're thankful, and you know, they say it to you. Thank you so much for this, that, or the other thing, or something you said, something you did. The atmosphere in your classroom, or when you're walking down the hallway, or whatever. Anyway, I think that's what it's all about. And I think, anyway, I know my province is a better place because throughout the years we've always insisted that education was so important. That's why I'm glad to live in Ontario, in my province, because it's always been a priority. Let's focus on that. And that's why we live in what I would consider to be in pleasant communities and in an efficient and benevolent society. I'm going to make a link with a retired, and this goes back probably 40 or 50 years, asking why do you want to become a teacher? Okay. Someone asked me the question and I said, what? Because I want to work with kids, because, you know, this is fun. And I think I'm making a positive contribution, and so on and so forth. And the person who asked me the question said, can I help you along here? And I said, yeah, well, okay. Yeah. But I'm still trying to figure things out. And the response was, I teach. And the person who was asking me the question was a teacher. I teach because I want good neighbors.
Oh.
And I kind of went, okay, yeah, that's one. I like that. Okay. And actually the retired teacher lived in Azilda.
Oh.
And once you get that in your mind and you say, why do I teach? Because I want good neighbors. You want people to be good citizens? Well, you want good neighbors too, right? So anyway, all of that and the sort of philosophy of education, but yeah.
Really, anything else you'd like to add?
I think I've said enough.
Well, I'm going to say last word. I really appreciate your exchange, your sharing of your life with me, and I see there's gratitude.
Yeah.
There's hope, and there's love.
Yeah.
For the kid, the child, for the community.
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful
Absolutely.
that you shared your life, part of your life, important parts of your life. Merci beaucoup.
My pleasure. Merci. Merci bien.